Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer from the South Valleys Library, and I am so happy to welcome you to What It Means to Be a Mustang with best-selling local author Terri Farley as part of our Tales and Tales Summer Reading Challenge. Some of you are certainly familiar with Terri's Phantom Stallion series for young readers or her young adult novel, 7 Tears into the Sea. These fiction titles have sold over 2 million copies worldwide, and she was inducted into the Nevada Writers Hall of Fame in 2017. Terri's nonfiction book, Wild at Heart, Mustangs and the Young People Fighting to Save Them, is a Junior Library Guild selection, winner of the Sterling North Heritage Award for Excellence in Children's Literature, and has been honored by Western Writers of America, National Science Teachers Association, and American Association for the Advancement of Science, among many other awards and accolades. We are super lucky to have Terri here with us today. As a former student and current fan and friend, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Terri Farley.
Yay, thank you. Thank you. I take full credit for all of my students' accomplishments. All right, I'm going to get going. And I want to tell everybody before we start that I am happy to answer questions. And even after the presentation, we'll work something out.
For centuries, wild horses ran like rivers. Mustangs are nomads. Their homes change with the seasons. A stallion trots to the tempo of silent drums, ears pricked forward, his nostrils flare. A war dance has begun. America's Mustangs are disappearing. Since 1971, over 300,000 Mustangs have been rounded up and removed from the West. The last wild horse may have already been born. America's remaining Mustangs have defenders. Velma Johnston took a stand. They called her Wild Horse Annie. In classrooms across the country, she told students about America's wild horses. She understood the power of young people. When they joined her fight, Velma knew the horses had a chance.
All right, I am keeping Melissa Farlow's name on almost everything because she did all of the images that you're going to be seeing. Melissa is a Pulitzer Prize winning photojournalist and a great traveling companion. We work together on Wild at Heart, and we've stayed in touch, and we've done some presentations together. And I hope we're going to do some more. All right, this is sort of a bio page, and Jen's already introduced me, but I thought I'd let you know who's going to be telling you all about wild horses. I claim to know everything by a long shot, but I've been studying wild horses for, I don't know, about the last 20 years. And I will do my best to answer your questions. I grew up as one of those kids who had pretty weak eyes and asthma, and I was allergic to everything. The only pets I had were salamanders and chameleons. I was in Los Angeles. but I did outgrow my allergies, moved to Nevada, and got to see the wild horses that I had already fallen in love with through books. Now I have 36 books that are wild horse fiction, but they are fact-based fiction. In fact, I have testified in court based on the factual part of my fact-based fiction. And Wild at Heart is my first totally nonfiction book. And everything in there is absolutely as accurate as it could be at the moment it went to press. And I have kept up with wild horse science, especially since the book came out. In addition, I have the Phantom Stallion audiobooks are out now. You can get those any place you get audiobooks. And shortly, like in 2023, I guess that's not so shortly, but in 2023, the Phantom Stallion books will be reissued with new covers, new content, and a bunch of stuff we haven't decided on yet. So I have a master's degree in journalism. And why does that matter to you? It matters because everything I tell you is factual. It's not my opinion. And if you think something is, please feel free to follow up with me. If you have a numerical question, I may have to get back with you because data changes from day to day. And besides that, I don't memorize numbers very well. This is the real Phantom Stallion. And I just wanted you to see him. He is the horse that in my imagination started the Phantom Stallion books, but this is the real Phantom. The real Phantom lived in the Virginia City Highlands in Nevada, and he was captured, and he lives in a wild horse sanctuary now in Northern California. All right, for the next 10 or 15 minutes, you are going to transform yourself into a wild horse. I'm going to help you do that by telling you all about yourself. But if you want to kick off your shoes so you have hooves or anything like that, feel free. If you're a wild horse, there are three things that are important to you. Three major things that dominate your life. The most important thing to you is family. Second is freedom. Third is food. Now, this horse looks like he is alone. And it's pretty uncommon to see a lone wild horse. This one, however, is overlooking a watering hole where his family is drinking. And that is because he is the sentinel. He is watching for any trouble that might sneak up on his family. If you're a wild horse, you adapt because you have to go wherever your family goes. And that can change. Most horses, natural wild horse bands, go to the same places year after year. And I'll talk about why, about food later, but they tend to go to the same place. However, if something changes, they go where they can have food and freedom. So if, well, one of the reasons the Phantom that you just saw was gathered was because a housing development was built on his winter grazing area. So of course he had to change what was going on with his life and with his family. One thing that's kind of cool about this picture, you'll notice this little horse, it's a roan, and he looks grayish white with a hot red mane. And this picture was taken in the winter. And something I didn't even know until I started doing this nonfiction book was that wild horses do have, to a certain extent, adaptive coloring. So he may be gray white in the winter if he lives in an area where there's snow. But when we saw him again in the summer, he was as red as his mane. If you're a wild horse, where do you live? In pre-human times, wild horses lived on this entire continent. They were the most widely dispersed species of mammal that there was. So they were already all down to the tip of South America. Today, wild horses in the US are in mainly the American West. They're in Arizona, California, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, Oregon, Utah, and Wyoming. Now, some of those herds have dwindled. A couple summers ago, half the wild horses in California were rounded up by the Bureau of Land Management. If you're a wild horse, you know that safety is with the band. Now, I'm going to use the word band and the word herd. The simplest way that I can explain that is a wild horse band is a family group. And a herd is like a whole neighborhood of horses. So there might be 5 or 6 or 7 different bands in a herd area. There could even be more than that. But safety is with the band. They stay with their family because they are prey animals. That's pretty natural. You've seen, if you watch the animal specials, animal documentaries, you'll see that an awful lot of mammals that are prey animals live in family groups, and that's because it's safer. So who's in your family band if you are a wild horse? Okay, if you're a wild horse, you look around and there's definitely your mother, definitely your mom, and probably your father. There could be cousins and full brothers and sisters and half brothers and sisters. But something you'll notice if you're a wild horse is there's a missing group. And that missing group is sort of late teenage and adult male horses. And that's because wild horse groups have 2 leaders. I'm going to refer to the band that you're born into as the wild horse as your natal band. And that's important. That's the band that you were born into. If you're a newborn Mustang, your mother watches over you and her sister Mustangs watch over you. You have to be able to stand. Well, it's good that you're able to stand within the hour, and babies have to be able to walk and then to run within the first few days of their lives. Again, because they are prey animals. And by the way, that's P-R-E-Y for anybody who didn't pick up on my description. And the good thing about wild horses, I said that the band, safety is with the band. And there's always somebody to look after you. If you watch the interactions between wild horses, you'll see that the strongest horses look after the next strongest, and those horses look after the ones that are a little weaker than they are, and right on down. And you see that in the leadership too. You have 2 leaders if you are in a wild horse band. You have the stallion, who is the one that usually gets all the credit. The band stallion is the protector. He is not the leader when you see wild horses running across the range. The horse that's in front is almost always the lead mare. And she knows where there's water. She knows where there's grass. She has the maps in her head. She also tends to be the lead disciplinarian. If you get in trouble as a teenage wild horse, she's probably the one that doles out the punishment, unless you've been really bad. But that's very unlikely. So the stallion, when you see these horses running across the range, the lead mare is in front, and she's like the alpha female. And the stallion, the BAM stallion, is in the very back. And if you take a minute to think, why do you think the stallion is in the back? I said he's the protector. Yeah, he is there so that if a mountain lion decides to chase, if humans decide to chase, the slowest, the oldest, the youngest horses will be in the back, and he is there to be the protector. Also, if you tend to be lagging behind, there's no good reason for it, he will give you a little nip. If you're a wild horse, as I said, you're a prey animal. So you don't do all the screaming and neighing and whinnying that usually movie wild horses do. You're very quiet and you do a lot of body language. Now, if we were in a classroom together, this is the point where I would have you do wild horse body language. And you could do it if you're alone at home or in your office or under your desk. If you look at this horse, and this is a captive wild Mustang named Shoshone. She's being very watchful. You'll see that her eyes are wide. She also has her ears pricked up. That's how a wild horse's ears, or a domestic horse usually, ears are. They are so cool. Their ears can pivot from side to side like a satellite to pick up different sounds and figure out the direction of where the sound is coming from. The sounds that you hear most commonly from wild horses are snorts. And a snort and a stomp can mean almost anything from "what's that?" to "did you hear that?" to "leave me alone." But a snort is something to get another horse's attention. Now, this kind of body language, you do not have to be a wild horse expert to understand. This is the real phantom again. And this is a behavior that's called snaking. If you're a wild horse and your father does this to you, you need to do precisely what he is asking you to do. And usually it's move along or stop that. If you look at the picture carefully, you'll see there's a little roan mare next to the phantom, but then you see a tail on the other side of just going away. That was a horse that was messing with the little roan mare. And the stallion put his head down to indicate that that horse should leave. And you can see he has, instead of having his ears up all alert and nice, they are flattened against his neck, and it looks like a snake coming after you. That's why it's called snaking. If you're a wild horse, every game you play prepares you for a dangerous life on the range. And every game is designed to help you keep the three most important things to you. Again, family, freedom, and food. These two are young horses who, and males and females do this, who are just kind of play fighting. They're not hurting anybody, although they did get in trouble later because it was a foggy day and they were running around chasing everybody, and the lead mare had to scold them and tell them they were in danger of stepping on some foals and things like that. But otherwise, they're just playing. Another way wild horses, I guess, communicate is, this looks like a really sweet picture. And often when I'm doing this presentation in a classroom, people go, "Ah, well, these horses are not being lovey-dovey." If you look way, way, way down at the bottom, kind of by their nostrils, you'll see that they are sniffing a pile of poop. This is the beginning of what is called a stud pile. When wild stallions are on the range, they tend to look for the poop. We're going to be talking about poop a couple times today. Look for the poop from another stallion. By sniffing it, they can tell if this horse is in good shape, if it's somebody they should be afraid will come try to steal some of their family members. And then if they decide that, they get the information, there's, it's like a dog sniffing a telephone pole. But then what they do is they add a little something to it. They will poop on top of the other stallion's poop so that other horses will know they're there to be reckoned with as well. I call this picture battle mirror, and that's because if you're a wild horse, if you get in a fight, even if you win, you're going to be injured. You will be hurt. Wild horses use their hooves, which are hard as rock, and their teeth and their body weight to fight. But they do not rush into a fight. Very rarely do they rush into a fight because, again, they have to take care of themselves. Nobody's going to take them for stitches, or if they get kicked in the mouth and a tooth broken, nobody's going to make sure they're able to eat something soft. So what wild horses do, like these two, is they show off their strengths. And they do that by mirroring each other's body language. So if one stallion flexes by pawing the ground and showing his shoulder muscles, the other will do the same. Like, you think that's big? Look at me. They do a lot of displays. Then they get close enough to smell each other's breath, especially if it looks like it's going to be an even fight. They want to look for some disadvantages in the other horse, the weaknesses in the other horse that they can use. Now, you'll notice that one of these horses has a tattoo on his neck, and that's because he is a captive Mustang. And when the Bureau of Land Management rounds up wild horses, they do a freeze brand on their neck. And that brand, if you can read it, and you can't read it now, most of you can't, but it's called an angle alphabet. And it tells you where the horse was rounded up and when and things like that. But if you look at these two stallions, look at their necks. These guys have been in a few fights before, so they haven't walked away from every fight. This is still kind of a body language thing. Although these two are very, very close, they're not doing hard kicks with their hooves, and they're certainly not biting. In the next picture, you'll see what they really look like when they're fighting. Now, the white horse is going for the throat. If you can see, you might even be able to see some fur flying off the bay horse. That's a serious fight. You'll also notice that the rest of their bands are not paying any attention. I have yet to have anybody explain to me why it's that way. I know the lead mare pays some attention, because if it turns into a running battle, she will move the rest of the band away. Now, you'll notice a size difference in these two guys. So this isn't a fight, but it doesn't look like the smaller horse is having a very good time. When the lead mare and the band stallion decide that you, a young male horse, are getting too big for your britches and it's time for you to leave the band, they start warning you, because you will eventually be separated from your family band, so you don't harass your cousins and sisters and things like that. That's how wild horses keep from inbreeding. The teenage males are chased away. But usually there's a time before that where they are getting more and more discipline from the leaders of the family band. And I mentioned that it keeps him from harassing his relatives, but the thing you're looking at is genetic diversity. And a wild male is chased off, but teenage fillies or mares, the females, are not. Their father may allow them to have overnights with males they've been flirting with out on the range, but then they'll return to their natal band almost always. If they're allowed to, they will return to their moms and their aunts so that they will have babies within their natal band. And again, that adds to the genetic diversity and makes that strain of wild horses stronger. If you're a wild horse, this is the beginning of the worst day of your life. You'll notice that there are two helicopters working together. If you're a wild horse, what would you call those? They don't know what helicopters are. They don't know what choppers are. If you're a wild horse, you look up at those, and I'd like you to think for a minute, what would you think they are if you've only had a natural life and rarely seen humans? In my mind, they're called death birds, if I'm a wild horse. But what happens is that we'll talk about the why later, but this is how wild horses are rounded up and taken off the range. And this is where family loyalty can work against them. Wild horses try to stay together. And the good news is once in a while, one of them who's been chased by helicopters before will be able to escape. And clearly, I mean, if you're any kind of an animal, you know that those guys are hiding behind that rope fence. That's called jute, the fabric that they use. But the helicopters are pursuing you very closely, as you can see in this picture. I don't think you'd ever see a group of horses this closely packed together unless they were in helicopter roundup. And one of the reasons they're so shiny is because they're sweating. Now, Melissa, the photojournalist, was very, very fortunate to get these pictures. This predates the Bureau of Land Management deciding it was too dangerous for photographers to take photographs of wild horses. She was working for National Geographic, and they allowed her to get this close. That just does not happen anymore. If you see close pictures like this, it's with a really expensive zoom lens. So at the end of this day, if you're a wild horse, you will have lost those three main things that are important to you. You'll lose your family because the stallions are put, this predates this rule. The rule now is the stallions, so the fathers, the band leaders all go into one pen. The mares, the females, the adult females all go into another pen, and the babies go into a third pen. So you've lost your family, you've lost your freedom. And let me tell you, the food they give wild horses in holding is nothing like what they eat on the range. I'm going to pause here for some questions, Jen.
We have one question in the chat that I see. So is there ever only one adult male in the band?
No. I have seen on Shackleford Island when I was working for Earthwatch, and also on the Virginia range for sure, there can be a lead stallion and there's an alpha and a beta. Sometimes the two stallions are related, or maybe after they were kicked out of their family bands, they became buddies. And they kind of divide the responsibilities. Often, one of the stallions is in charge of mating with the mares and making sure no other stallions take them. The other stallion is the fighter. He specializes in defending the family band. And I've never seen more than two. I think that would get way too crazy. I've also seen it only once though, and people who are on the range more than I am may have seen this, but I've only seen it once, that it's a father-son pair. And usually the son is the warrior. The dad is the king and the son is the warrior, and they protect the band together. You know, of course, the older horse is probably wiser.
Even though they're prey animals, Terri, they remind me of the way like a lion pride behaves. Is that a fair comparison?
It is, because, you know, we used to just think that animals stood around and did nothing. But now that we've studied their social structure, you know, we know that female lions have a much more dominant role than we thought. And we know that lead mares have a dominant role in the band.
And then there is a follow-up question that is, are there any bands without a stallion?
There are occasionally two mares that will pal around together, but it doesn't last long. Stallions are pretty programmed to have a family. You will occasionally see lone horses, and usually those are lone stallions, either a young male that's just been kicked out of the herd, out of the band, and hasn't palled together with what's called a bachelor band, or an old stallion. And that's sad. And I always think it's really sad that they're all on their own with their battle scars and everything. But a lot of times those old stallions are pretty smart, and they'll wait for a young stallion to somehow defeat another stallion, and then they'll go in there and beat him up. So you don't have to feel too sad for them. Also, they're doing what is familiar to them. And if I were a wild horse, I'd rather die alone on the range than during a roundup or in a pen someplace. But that's me pretending to be a wild horse. Okay, you can stop being a wild horse now. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of the horses. Okay, do you feel human? This is Thule Springs, and this is in southern Nevada. And this was a really, really popular area for big mammals during prehistoric times. We know that ancestors of our horses today live down here. It's only about a half-hour drive from the Strip in Las Vegas. And it was almost destroyed. Right now, it's one of the most fossil-rich places in the US. But that's because 3 women, and they were not native Nevadans, they were new to Nevada, saved it. It had been put on a plan to be paved over as part of a freeway exit right over the fossil beds. And they heard about it and said, no, wait, We shouldn't do that. We should save this. Well, Thule Springs is now a national monument. Enough people worked hard enough that they saved it. And you can go down there. I picked up a fossil down there. There used to be wild American lions and camels. And let me see, I'm not going to tell you everything, but dire wolves and mammoths and giant sloths. All of these animals coexisted here. They shared the wild earth. And they didn't all make it, obviously, or we would have mastodons in Las Vegas. And but it is a beautiful place. You can go walk around there now. They do have docents on horseback that can tell you what you're seeing. And it is a very, very cool place. And this is an artist's rendition of what that area may have looked like. It's called Thule Springs, even though today it looks more like desert, because it was a very water-rich area. So we have a lot of fossils there because a lot of animals went there to eat, and a lot of predators attacked their prey while they were eating. You'll notice there's a horse off to the side there, and take a good look at this horse. Also, remember what I just said for a while, that they shared the earth, okay? Dire wolves, horses, mammoths, camels. Okay, now, later I'm gonna, I hope, show you some, my own personal fossil and a wild horse jaw to compare the two. Horses in America might have died out from a number of things, but probably it was an accumulation of things. Climate change, for sure, because it got cold. And a lot of their usual food died. So even if it was plant, if it was animal, you know, obviously the horses didn't eat animals, but that was one thing. Another thing that happened is that about the time that horses died, we think died out in North America, that's when humans and their wolf dogs came in. So there was some hunting. There's, you know, scientific opinion right now doesn't seem to be that they were hunted to extinction. It was probably a combination of things. If, for instance, the wolf dogs carried some kind of a disease or a virus that was transferable to other mammals, you know, horses have a 10-month gestation period. So if you knock out a baby, which would be the most likely to die, it takes a long time to make a new one. But a lot of these horses went north to escape. And they probably looked a lot like this. These are called Chevalsky horses. And if you read about horses, you'll probably recognize it as a word that's Russian and starts with PZ and then it's alphabet soup, at least to the English reader. And these horses probably are the ones that went north to escape the cold. The ones that I have pictures of are at the Denver Zoo. And when I talked to the equine specialist at the Denver Zoo, I learned that she told me that these horses were so fierce, she would not go in their enclosure without a shield like they use when they go in with the big cats. And she said, you know, zebras are fine, wild asses are fine, but these Chevalsky horses are pretty tough, which would kind of make sense that those are the ones who would just go, I've had enough of this cold, and they would head out of the area. These horses, the wild horses, in the United States live on public lands. Now that might be land that's managed by the Bureau of Land Management, might be Forest Service land. Some wild horses do stray onto private lands. But the ones, the roundups you see most often, and the ones that the public has some input on, are on Bureau of Land Management controlled lands. However, public lands are just what they sound like. They belong to American citizens. And so those horses belong to you. And when you hear them called BLM horses or Forest Service horses, you need to remember that they are actually publicly owned. Those horses belong to you. Now, we don't get a direct voice in what happens to them, but if you pay attention, you'll know where the decisions are being made. Why are they rounding up wild horses? That's a question that I'm asked all the time. And if you go to the Bureau of Land Management's website, which is in pretty good shape right now, you will see that they say the horses are either too numerous, they're overpopulated, or they are damaging grazing areas, something like that. And that they are edging out native wildlife. Remember what I said about sharing the land with dire wolves and things like that? Wild horses have been living in harmony with other species for a few million years. And they haven't died out. So what's changed? What's changed is, for the most part, humans coming into an area and having different ideas about the land. The animals survived fine without us, but we're here now. So, we can't, sadly, we can't just say, well, let everything go back the way it was, because it can't go back the way it was. When you hear that wild horses are overcrowded or overpopulated, here's what happens. I have a great little video online that shows this better than I can show you now. But let's say that there was, in your neighborhood, there were 300 acres and it had, no, I'll make it human. Let's do this. Okay, let's pretend in your neighborhood, in your house, there are 4 people. Maybe it's a 2-bedroom house. So you and your sister and brother are in one room, your parents are in the other. Now, let's say that 3 houses on the block get knocked down, and the people that live in those houses have to come into your house. And then they knock down another house, and those people have to come in your house. Okay, is this your parents' fault for overpopulating? Just having kids right and left? No, that's because people got crowded into your house. Same kind of thing is going on with a lot of wildlife, not just horses. If you live in a rural area, this could be happening. You may have deer that are in your yard. You may have elk, depends on where you live. But the animals very rarely are overpopulating. It's that they get crowded out of their natural habitat. So we make decisions about this. I live in an area that is a deer wintering area. And my house has been there since 1900, but I bet there was a bigger herd of deer there in 1900. The houses around me are more recent, so the deer are being crowded out of their natural habitat. Same thing's going on with horses. So you know, one of the things I like people to do, and maybe this is my journalism background, but consider the source. Anytime you see any information, consider where it's coming from and consider which decisions might have led to those facts. All right, this is one of my favorites. I told you we're going to talk about poop some more. This is something that is really exciting and has so much potential to save humans. Doesn't look like it. It looks like horse poop. It is horse poop. Wild horses are nomadic, but they tend to go back to the same areas year after year. And that's because that's where their food is. So they take their families back to the same areas where they know they can find food. And the reason their food is there is something extremely cool. Wild horses' guts do not process seeds. So when a wild horse eats something that they find delicious, they get all of the energy out of it. And when they poop, the seeds are alive in there. So what you have are seeds with fertilizer, just like you would do in your garden. And so when we hear that wild horses are devastating the range, there's not a lot of logic behind that, because they replant the food, the native plants. The only thing they eat early is cheatgrass. And if you live in the West, you probably have heard of cheatgrass most commonly when we're talking about wildfires, because cheatgrass will come in and it's called cheat, like CHEAT, because it cheats out the natural plants that should be there, the native plants. And if you have a garden that you're weeding, you'll see a lot of it. Luckily, it comes up easy. Well, wild horses eat cheatgrass early in its life cycle before it sets seeds. So they eat it when it's young and tender, has no seeds. So when they eat it, they don't replant it. They end its life cycle. That's it. It's gone. So wild horses, I would love to see a really good academic study on this, but I haven't yet. But where wild horses are, and there are fewer wildfires. That's anecdotal, but they do eat the cheatgrass, which is easy fuel for fires. Cattle, on the other hand, we have bred cattle so that every crumb they eat goes straight to meat that we can eat. And they do not replant plants. Could they eat some fuel for wildfires? Yes, they could. But the downside is they don't replant the native stuff. And for a lot of us, that's important because it helps the sage grouse, it helps antelope, it helps everything. Pronghorn, I guess I should say. Okay, taking a little break here. I want to give a shout out to Melissa again. Melissa and her husband are both National Geographic photojournalists, and they have all kinds of strategic ways to get pictures. They have underwater cameras, but they also have some that are triggered at the edge of water sources like this. And you can see the horses hearing the click, click, click. You can see all the ears. They're not fooled. They haven't survived for millions of years by going, oh, what's that, a cricket? No, they know what it is, not normal. Now, this is one of the pictures that I showed you earlier, and this is what happened to Melissa's camera. She buried it in the ground and a hoof caught the lens, and National Geographic had to replace it. I could give you 2 hours or 3 on Wild Horse Annie, but I won't. I'll just tell you that if you live in the Reno area, her grave is very nearby. She was a native Nevadan. She was born in Ione, out in the middle of the state. And She was a very determined and so smart woman. The more I hear about her, the smarter she is. She worked around obstacles instead of trying to bull her way through. But she was instrumental in getting legislation passed that said it was illegal to round up wild horses for slaughter. First, in Story County, Nevada, she helped get legislation passed that meant there was no aerial roundups. And she got that passed in 1971 in the United States legislature, in the Senate. But one of the last things she said was, "I wish I could tell you the story is over." Well, after she died, shortly after she died, the law was adapted so that aerial roundups are legal again. And we've been fighting back and forth during my lifetime to decide whether it's legal to round up the horses and for slaughter, either for human use in other countries primarily, or for dog food or whatever. I also found out that horse hides are used for conveyor belts. Had no clue about that. Okay. So what's happening to the horses now? They are under assault. We hope that things are going to change, but I'm going to show you some kids that I know personally who are fighting to save the wild horses. I'm not going to tell you everybody's life story. It's in Wild at Heart if you want to read their stories. But this is Robin, and she's a Nevadan. Let's see, that's Cheyenne. She's older now. She's competing as a barrel racer. She's from Texas. These twins, oh man, I'm trying to remember. I think they're in Oregon. I hope I'm not wrong. I'll be corrected if I am. California, DC, Colorado, and Northern California. That little colt's name is Texas, and I am proud to say that the first night he was an orphan, and the second night he was away from his band, I was his body heat. I slept in a stall with him to keep him warm. This is the son of a friend of mine, Lori, also known as Palomino, who rescues baby wild horses. Okay, this is pretty much where we're going to stop. Because right this minute, you know more about wild horses than most people on the planet. And you know what they want, you know what they need. And if you live in the US, these horses belong to you. And now you know part of their story. You can do whatever you want to do about that, or you can just be aware of them, because you can't care if you don't know anything. And in a minute, we're going to have more questions, if there are some. This is my website and Melissa's. I really advise you to look at her incredible photography. It's not just horses. I mean, Melissa is the only person I know who's been stalked by a polar bear, for instance. And let's see what else I have here. Should have one more slide. If I don't, it's okay. That's it. Okay, we are going to stop here. I will tell you that, again, that last slide was supposed to tell you that the new Phantom Stallion books will be coming out in 2023. And right now, if you want to listen, go on a family road trip and listen to audio books, I think the first 6, so that's times 5. That's a good long road trip. You can listen to the Phantom Stallion books. Thank you so much.
Hey, Terri, did you say you had some fossils you were going to show us?
Oh yeah, cool. Yes, I do. Okay, the first thing I'm going to show you is a contemporary horse, like a horse that was alive a few years ago. And I'm showing you the jaw because the fossil that I have is of a 2 million-year-old horse jaw. So I'm going to show you separately, and then I'm going to see if I can balance them, and so you can compare them side by side to get an idea of the shape of those teeth. And the reason this is important is because there are people who say, oh no, they're not the same animal at all. The prehistoric horses are not the same thing as today's horses. And the fossil record indicates that's different. That's not true. Let's see. My background's kind of, now, can you see those teeth? And you saw the other ones sideways. Ooh, weirdo. Okay, maybe I should show them down here. Oh, that's better. Okay. Yeah. For a minute it was.
You put it kind of in front of you a little bit, I think. There you go, right there.
Yeah. Okay, there's that. And I will show you, that's sideways, show you these other teeth. Can you see that? I can't see through the bone, but.
Maybe down. There you go. There we go.
There. Yeah, they are the same animal. And the window of time during which we don't have a continuous fossil record is pretty small, and it's narrowing because if there's an upside to global warming, it's that a lot of the permafrost is melting, and we're finding fossils of wild horses, of equines that lived not just millions of years ago, but hundreds of thousands of years ago, which is kind of a huge difference. And so it hasn't gotten down to nothing yet, but it's not like a continuous timeline in the fossil record. But, you know, we used to think that horses had been gone from the continent for millions of years. Now it's hundreds of thousands. So one of the great things about working with scientists is that they will they'll rethink things when they get new data. And I love that. I mean, sometimes it's not what you want. The conclusions aren't what you want, but they do rethink when they get the new information. Okay, oh, I was gonna add one last thing too. Oh, the fossil, by the way, is from the Pleistocene era, so like 2 million years ago. If you are a writer and you're under 18 or younger, there's a contest going on right now from Wild Beauty, and I'm not sure if it's .org or .com. They're the people who made the new Black Beauty movie, and a lot of the actors that were involved got excited about wild horses while they were working on the movie, and they now have a foundation that helps to protect wild and domestic horses. But they are having a contest, a writing contest. It's a short story contest. There are 2 divisions, elementary and then secondary. And the stories have to be fact-based. So if you were here today, or if you're using this as a resource, feel free to take any information you can from this. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me later. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, not quite as much as the other two, but I'm on Facebook and Twitter daily. And I don't know, Jen, do you know if I will be able to answer questions on the Washoe County Library website, or should I direct people to my website?
It's probably best if they go directly to your website, but also people can, if you wanted to answer them maybe on the Facebook page. So if people went to this event on our Facebook page and wanted to ask a question in the comments, then you could reply there. That would be a good.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That is good.
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
I think we're a little bit over time. I don't really see anything in the chat. I have some questions, but maybe I'll throw them in the Facebook comments as well, and then you can address them when you have time. But thank you so very, very much for joining us today. I learned so much, and it was really a pleasure to learn those things and to see Melissa's gorgeous, stunning photography. All of the pictures that Terri showed today are in the book Wild at Heart, which is available for checkout at the Washoe County Library and for sale at, and for sale at all, at any bookstore. You can get that. And also don't forget to mark off your virtual event square on your summer reading bingo card, or log the challenge in the Beanstack app. And you can find more cool virtual events at washoecountylibrary.us/events, where you will also find the archive of this program, and we will add all the links and supplemental materials that you need alongside of that as well. All right, any additional things to add, Terri?
No, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks to our audience.